Welcome to MumAbroad's YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by Sarah Alakija. She's an ex-deputy headmistress with over 15 years experience in the independent school sector in the United Kingdom. In 2016, she started her own business to focus on the part of the job that she loves most, which is supporting and guiding students on their individual journey. And she now offers expert advice on all areas of the university admissions process. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jane. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Sarah, what is it that you like so much about helping students directly? And what do you think makes you good at your job?
I think anyone in education goes into education to directly work with students. And the problem which I had working as a deputy was that actually that tends to take you away from as much of the day-to-day interaction with students that you joined for. So I wanted to get back to that because you can really watch development. You can really watch those wow moments, those kind of light bulb moments when they get something, even in university admissions where you would think, what is there to get? But actually, when I'm supporting a student with their subject specifically, broadening their kind of understanding of the subject, you do get those lovely light bulb moments after they've done it for a few months and everything comes together and they just think, oh God, I've just really understood it. I've just seen all those links and worked out why we've been doing what we've been doing. There's nothing like that. There's genuinely nothing like that. And I think also working so closely with them at this stage of university admissions, it really feels like it's step one of the rest of their lives. And to be part of that is such privilege. It's incredible to know that, you know, once results day is done and they've got their place, that at one really important door has closed and such another such important one has opened. That really is, what's the word? It's so formative in how the rest of their life will pan out. So that is wonderful. That's a real privilege. And I mean, I think the final part of your question was about what makes me good at it. Mm-hmm. I'm too modest to say that I'm good at it, to be honest. But I will say that I love it. I love it. And I think one of the reasons I probably do love it and that you might say I was successful at it is because I listen. And that's always been so important to me since I took my very first job in education. I've always worked with teenagers only, and they need to be listened to. Lots of people don't listen to them. Lots of people assume that they know what teenagers are going through. Lots of people, I think, try to get on the same level as a teenager, and actually that's never succeeded. I've never seen that succeed in terms of building a strong relationship. The most important thing I think I've ever learned to do is really listen to what they want. Can't always give them what they want, but you need to listen at least. So I think having a couple of good skills like that and really enjoying my work is what might make me good. Yeah.
I love hearing what you say because I have a 17-year-old and it's so important to listen to her. It really is. It's a steep learning curve having teenagers, I think, perhaps even more so than having toddlers. And I'm learning so much myself from my own teenagers. But listening is absolutely key. And if you don't listen at the right time, you're really in trouble, I find. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. And someone who's working with a family, the family of a teenager, that can be quite privileged as well, because you may not want to hear this right now, but there are often things which they won't say to parents. They just, for whatever reason, nothing to do with the parents at all, frankly, on most occasions, but that they will share with somebody like me who's not connected with the family.
I remember when I did my own application that it was actually a fairly straightforward process. That was 30 years ago or so now. So what would you say are the most significant changes in the applications process that have led to the rise in specialists such as yourself? Because you're not the only one out there that does this kind of work.
No, absolutely. There are a lot more people like me. The application process itself hasn't changed that much, in all honesty. I mean, there are technical things like, you no longer handwrite your application. Fair enough. You can apply. You don't have to sort of put your choices in order, which you used to have to do. But actually, I think that those are minor things, really. I think what's really changed is the competition. More and more people now go to university. We've had the removal of the polytechnics. So when you're talking about, we had two systems. We had UCA and PCAS, and UCA was for the traditional, what we would call the Russell Group universities, and then PCAS was for the polytechnics, the more vocational universities. They've all come together now. It's the same umbrella. They all come under the same umbrella application system. So there is a lot more competition. So really, the biggest change, I think, is having to make your application stand out in a sea of really strong candidates. A-level grades go up and up every year, so everyone has great grades for the most competitive universities. So it's about changing how you sell yourself to the universities. I suppose one other thing that has come along, which is a change to some extent, with the removal of AS levels. Universities no longer have that sort of second touch point to judge students on, which they used to have. So they'd have GCSEs and then they'd have AS level grades, which they could really use quite successfully to sort of, to make some judgments. But that's now gone. So what we now have are lots of admissions tests. Obviously, those are for Oxford and Cambridge. I think many people will know about that, but they are for other universities as well. Warwick, for example, Imperial, etc., will use admissions tests. So that is slightly different to 30 years ago. We did have entrance tests for Oxford and Cambridge, but just not at quite the level that we've got things now.
And those admissions tests need preparation for, presumably.
So I think one of the things which students worry about with admissions tests is how to practice and prepare for them, because they worry that they've got to learn loads of stuff, but actually it's not about knowledge of the subject. It's about skills. These are aptitude tests on the whole. So they're looking for the way that students think, reasoning from premise through to conclusion, thinking logically and clearly, rather than, how much history do I know? So in that sense, yes, they can be practiced, and actually practice is the best way to think about it, rather than students thinking they've got to learn stuff. They need to sit down and do lots and lots of past papers. So yes, in answer to your question, they can definitely prepare, and they really must.
What would you say is the most difficult part of the university application process?
That's difficult. I would say the most challenging part is to build a body of supercurricular evidence of an interest in the subject. The universities won't accept you just saying, yeah, I love history. I've always loved it. Ever since I was a child and I started watching horrible histories, I've been hooked. That won't work. What will work is, this is my favourite area of the subject, and look at what I've done to investigate it away from the classroom. All of this extra reading, watching documentaries, watching films, plays where appropriate and when appropriate, listening to podcasts, doing online courses, watching online lectures, going to physical lectures at universities, etc., or wherever, public talks, reading research papers, journals, magazines, etc. Those things show the best universities that you love your subject. So I think that is a challenge for students, because I think a lot of them don't realise that that is one of the most important things to do. So that's something which requires them just to sort of start a little bit earlier than they might generally think they need to start the process.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a bit here and ask you, or say, that's fine if you know what you want to go to university and study. But what about for those students who aren't quite sure what they want to do, what path they want to take, and so they haven't got those extra curricular interests or achievements? Where do they fit into this application process?
So they have, obviously there comes a point where you have to make a decision. So they just need to spend more time working through the questions that help you to come to that decision. Sometimes that really is just a lot of discussions. What do you love? You know, what are your favorite kind of radio programs, TV programs? What's on your Netflix My List? What makes you excited? What kind of books, etc. Sometimes just several conversations like that can do it. But actually, sometimes what you have to do is start doing that super curricular research in all the things that you think you like. That's hard work, but sometimes that's the only way. So if you have a student who can't decide between business and geography, or economics and business, or whatever, then actually they're going to have to read some books on both, or watch some TED Talks, or whatever it might be, whatever they can cope with, because if they're not big readers, which many teenagers are not anymore these days, great pity, but anyway, you know, they're going to have to be a little bit at university. But you know, if that student isn't a great reader, I wouldn't say, right, here's 2 books on economics, here are 2 on business, because that won't work for them. But having discussions around both is probably the most effective way. But it is tough, and those students, yes, sometimes they will be starting their process later on than those who've been lucky enough to know for months or years what they want to do.
Sarah, what would you say are the most common worries that you get from students?
Easy. Personal statement. Yeah, personal statement, 100%. If we're talking about that process, the application process, if not that process, what A-levels or IB subjects to do in order to get to a university that's most appropriate. But in terms of the application process, it's the personal statement. Students are terrified of it, because it's, you know, one of the first times in their lives that they've got to sell themselves. You know, it's the me show, we call it, and that's quite difficult when you're 17, actually, to get the tone right, the content, the passion without gushing. Yeah, I think that's the toughest bit. And they're lucky when they come to me, because it's my favourite bit. It's absolutely my favourite bit. I'm a linguist by trade, a lawyer by degree, and so words are what I love. So I love working with them and teaching them how to bring all of their experiences together. Yeah. How
much do parents get involved in this process?
That's an excellent question. Every parent, every client of mine, every family is different. You know, there are cliches, actually. You know, there are certain parents in certain countries where they need to know everything. They really want to know everything, and that's fine. I think actually an informed parent is a real bonus for the student. So if a parent does understand what the personal statement should look like, more or less, in terms of at least the structure, I think that's really helpful. I keep my parents informed about everything that I'm doing. So when I send over, I set my students' work each month, suggested kind of research on their chosen subject for them to do. And I always copy parents in on that, because actually it's useful, not for nagging purposes, but actually, you know, if the student wants to talk to mum or dad because they've read a great book or seen a brilliant article, then at least mum and dad have got fair warning that might be coming, and they can have a look as well.
Sarah, you wrote and edited 4 editions of the Trotman guide, Getting into Oxford and Cambridge. How different is the application process for these 2 universities?
Different from each other, not hugely. Different from all the other universities, yes, significantly. It's significantly more draining. Everybody in the family, frankly. It's quite a long process, really. And I'm going to be controversial now, actually, and say, you mentioned earlier, what about those students who don't know what they want to study? Successful students for Oxford and Cambridge have known that they want to study that subject for a while. They, they would be what we would call, and I went the geeks of whatever subject it is, that I think is one of the big differences. Is it's such a hugely academic subject. The preparation does have to kind of start, at least mentally, a long time before. So the initial difference is the deadline. Oxford and Cambridge have an October deadline rather than the January deadline. Cambridge has another form for you to fill in after the main UCAS form. Then you will have admissions tests for the majority of subjects, not all of them. Oxford, you'll have pre-interview admissions tests for most subjects. Cambridge, it's sort of half and half. You would have admissions tests at interview. Then after those tests, hopefully you get an interview. After your interview, then hopefully you get a place. That all takes place within a 3 to 4 month period. The autumn term, first term of A2s or IB, quite an important term actually for getting on with A-level or IB work. So it requires a real commitment and a real desire to do it. It's not something to do in a half-hearted way. And the super curricular preparation, which I mentioned before, that's something that starts a year in advance. So there is quite a difference, yes. And I think something that has to be seen in an Oxbridge applicant is something which an Cambridge admissions officer said to me once when I asked, what would you count as the difference between a successful and unsuccessful applicant? I know that's a very wide question, but one of the fundamentals that she came up with was that when you interview a successful applicant, they have a sparkle in their eyes when they talk about their subject. To me, that is the person who, when I use the word geek, I use that warmly and proudly. That's not a pejorative term for me at all. That is the person who gets excited that they're going to sit an A-level exam because they're going to write about their favourite subject for 3 hours. That is the person who gets excited about getting a Cambridge interview, not just because it's a Cambridge interview, but because they are going to have 20 minutes talking with the guys that wrote the books, this is the books that they've been studying. They're going to meet those guys. That's exciting. That is what she was trying to say. That's the successful applicant. And that takes work, and that takes, as I said, an understanding that that's your favourite subject quite far back in your educational career. So when I work with schools, so I work with some schools abroad to help them get through this process and understand it a bit better. I ask them to try and start in the equivalent of year 9 and 10 to pick out who they think are potential Oxford applicants.
Sarah, you touched on earlier the fact that you work with students who are taking A-levels, and equally you work with students doing the IB, the International Baccalaureate. Do you see a difference in those students when they are in this application process? Do they handle the application in a different way, or have different skills, or not?
I think it really varies, actually. Really varies. I would say when we talk about A-levels and IB, I mean, British universities are, degrees were made for the British system. So degrees are made to fit with A-levels. You know, you do 3 subjects, you specialise, and then you go off and you specialise in 1 subject. You know, our system was built for that. But the IB has come along and challenged that. But it's challenged it to the point that universities love it. I mean, they really do. And when you look at any admissions page on a university website and you look for the entry requirements, the first one it will say is A-level, ABC, whatever it is, ABB. And then straight underneath that, it says IB. IB is no longer in the look at the international qualifications page for your equivalents. It's there in the same place. And that tells you everything about the respect that universities have. I think what I see on a practical level in dealing with IB versus A-level students is IB students have less time because they're busy. They are doing a lot more work because they're doing sort of outside of the classroom stuff as well. Just sometimes they have a little bit less time to focus on super curricular. But what they may lack in time there, they gain in kind of the breadth of skills that they've got. And some of the aspects of the IB allow them to have those sort of critical skills, which some A-level students may lack, particularly if they're doing pure science, for example.
You are obviously incredibly passionate about your job, so it's really interesting to talk to you about it. Just to be clear for our audience, you're based in the UK, Sarah, but you work with students all over the world, presumably.
I do, yes. So I'm based in the Southeast, and I have clients from France, Turkey, China, all over the US. Yeah. So, you know, there are no limits to who I can work with. Obviously, I work with UK students as well. But yeah, I do love my job, and I'm so pleased that's come across.
Oh, no, absolutely. It really has. Yeah. So if people would like to know more about your services, they can take a look at your website, which should be running along the bottom of the screen right now. That's charterseducationsupport.co.uk. And if they take a look there, they'll find your contact details, so your email address and telephone number.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jane. It was really good talk, and I hope that's helped.